Hi, I'm Duncan Cambridge. I'm an enterprise cloud architect with Google based in Australia.
And I'm Nikhila Guripati, a customer engineer based in India.
Everyone wants to be able to manage their cloud as easily as possible, and we're excited to be here today to tell you about a new Google Cloud feature called Active Assist and how it helps you do that. Cloud can be complicated. I think we all know it. Perhaps not as complicated as things used to be, but for some people, it can sometimes feel like cloud has more knobs and dials than this airplane cockpit does. Sometimes the complexity can be overwhelming. And we've seen, for example, that almost half of C suite executives have said that complexity was the factor that would have the most negative impact on their cloud ROI over the next 5 years. In fact, in some cases, complexity can make the cost of administration and maintenance outweigh the costs of software and hardware, which isn't what most people are looking to get from cloud. When we dig into the effects of the complexity, we see a few buckets. First, the complexity can cause waste. So things like VMs can be over provisioned, discounts aren't optimized, and all of this leads to unnecessary cost. Secondly, complexity can cause security gaps. And we've seen things like permissions being given away too freely or firewall rules that are so confusing that people are afraid to change them and they're not set up properly. And finally, all of this ends up causing a lot of extra work. So things get misconfigured, and now you've got to spend your team's time figuring out how to troubleshoot it all. At Google, we believe there's a better way, and we believe that the answer is in intelligence and automation. Today's IT environments, whether they're on-prem or in the cloud, feel like a car from the 1970s. Here's a classic model. Everything's manual. You've got to look over your shoulder, shift manually, and look at a map while you don't get particularly good mileage. What we want to do is upgrade your cloud and provide an experience a bit more like a modern car. So how can we provide tools like blind spot monitoring and GPS sensors that make the cloud experience much better and more automated? That's what we've been asking. And ultimately, we're on a journey to the future. So we really want your cloud to end up being more like the Google Waymo cars, where everything's automated. It won't happen overnight, but we're really keen to move things forward and provide you with the sorts of tools that can help you on this journey. So we're excited to introduce Active Assist. What is it? It's a new solution that brings together an array of intelligent features that all have a common goal, making it easier for you to optimize your cloud and reduce manual effort. So let's dig in and talk a bit more about how we came up with this. So we asked our customers what we could do to empower them with better intelligence and automation. And after speaking to a lot of you, there were three areas that came across loud and clear. The first is you want to find out what went wrong quickly so you can take action right away. Secondly, you want to stop mistakes from happening altogether. And thirdly, you want to improve the cloud easily and make it easy to take action on the recommendations that have come up. So we've worked hard to put this features into the cloud to help this. And there's three big things that we can deliver. First, we're going to give you more ways to understand how to optimize the resources in your cloud and let you automate that. Second, we're going to help you proactively secure the cloud by alerting you when things aren't configured the way they should be. And thirdly, all of it aims to make your life easier by reducing the time and the toil that it takes to troubleshoot, analyze, and configure the cloud. At the end of the day, Active Assist is aiming to help you maximize the cloud's overall performance because you shouldn't be on the hook to understand every nook and cranny to operate a cloud efficiently. Your cloud should work for you, and that's what we aim to do by helping you automatically optimize your resources. So we've got a customer here in Asia Pacific, ViewClip, who's a media company. They've been using some of the features of Active Assist to be able to take advantage of the recommendations, and it's really helped them to identify things that weren't configured the way they should be and resources that weren't really being utilized. And they've been able to save a lot of money as a result of doing that. It's not enough just to save the money, though. Everybody needs security in their cloud platforms. And we're in an age when organizations have more and more sensitive customer data going into their cloud, and hacks can be really devastating. So Active Assist helps proactively identify security gaps and maintain best practices. Many customers are able to use identity and access management role recommendations to make their environments more secure by reducing the number of permissions that are granted to people, for example. And we'll show you how this works in a few minutes. Active Assist will help you by using automation and intelligence to bring key actions right to your fingertips. It takes away the guesswork and mystery that's sometimes required to operate the cloud. So, for example, KPMG have been using this, and what they found is because it's made administration easier, they've actually been able to run more workloads in their cloud and scale up their operations, which is really what they're hoping to get out of using cloud in the first place. Okay, so now you might be asking, well, this all sounds pretty good, but how is Active Assist going to do all of this? And the fun answer is that Active Assist is going to unlock Google magic across your cloud deployment. So, what we've really done is we've used Google's specialities around data analytics and machine learning, and we've applied those to the administration of cloud services. And that's what powers Active Assist. So we're going to dig into more of these features and show you how this works in a second. Active Assist is a set of features that cuts across Google Cloud, and we'll be covering these different areas today. So whether you're interested in security or cost or networking, compute data, or our newest offering, Anthos, we've got features in each of these areas that can help you. And here we can see all of the areas of current and upcoming support. So Google Cloud's rapidly expanding, and these automated features are expanding with it. So to show you some practical examples of this, I'm going to hand over to Nikila, who's a customer engineer with a lot of experience assisting customers in this area.
Thanks, Duncan. So, in this next section, we're going to talk about how Active Assist can help you solve some of the challenges that you might be facing in terms of managing your resources in Google Cloud. Before we jump in, I just want to give you a reminder to pop any questions you may have in the dory for this session, and our teams will work on getting the answers for you. All right, so let's dive in. We'll start with a little story. This is Steve. He is in charge of an application. As part of his role, Steve made sure that his application was architected well, and he also set up the entire infrastructure. It's been some time since the launch, and things had been going fairly smoothly until recently. Like most of us, Steve could not predict the changes that are happening in the world right now. What Steve built was for normal conditions, whereas now we have more and more people who are at home. So their buying patterns are changing, their usage patterns are changing. So what Steve is witnessing is an exponential increase in the amount of traffic that is coming into his application, which is great. He's very happy that his application is becoming more and more popular. But then he's also concerned that he's probably not prepared to scale this, and scaling can be very hard. Steve and his colleagues from some of the other departments face a number of challenges, primarily around three areas: performance, cost, and security. Let's start with performance first. Imagine this is a Monday morning. Steve is still making his first cup of coffee, and this is when Steve gets a call from Alice. Alice is the head of the customer support department. And Alice tells Steve that they had a pretty bad weekend. They were flooded with customer calls, and most of the complaints were that their application had become very slow to respond. So Steve starts sipping his cup of coffee and he starts thinking, hey, what could be causing these performance issues? Is it compute capacity? Is it networking? Is it the data infrastructure that he set up? It could be anything, right? It might not even be an infrastructure issue that he's suspecting. He's worried that going down this laundry list of potential issues could take way too much time and effort, and all this while, his users will continue to experience slowness in his application. And then Steve has a eureka moment. He remembers that a couple of weeks earlier, he met up with a Google Cloud customer engineer who told him about Active Assist. The goal of Active Assist is to help administrators like him figure out ways of optimizing their deployment in the cloud without significant admin overhead. So he's super pumped and he goes into the recommendations hub in the Google Cloud console. He's excited to see that he has, in fact, recommendations across all the areas that he was thinking about: compute, networking, as well as data. Now, Steve has a hunch that, maybe his compute resources might be overloaded by all this new demand that's coming in. So the first thing he does is he looks at the VM right sizing recommendations. And what these recommendations tell him is that most of the VMs in his project are experiencing very high CPU as well as memory utilization. What the VM right sizing recommendations also tell him is that, hey, this size might be better suitable depending on the load that's coming in. So with just a few clicks, he's able to change the size of these VMs to make them more optimal and more suitable for his workload. Now, as Steve is doing this, he also thinks about, hey, how can I make sure that my compute resources are good enough and have the capability to handle any surge in demand that might come in? Now, he's already been using Compute Engine's real time autoscaler, but he doesn't think that it's doing very well for him because he has this huge monolithic Java based application that takes about 5 to 7 minutes just to initialize. And he suspects that there could be some sort of an autoscaling latency that could be contributing to the slowness in his application. So he turns on the predictive autoscaler from Active Assist. What the predictive autoscaler does is it forecasts future capacity needs based on historical data and spins up the new VM instances even before this upcoming demand is coming in. With this, Steve is able to reduce the effect or the risk of having autoscale latency in his deployment. Now that he's done addressing the capacity issues, Steve gets another call from Alice. And Alice tells him that she has been doing some sort of analysis on the customer calls that they received over the weekend. And she has discovered that most of the calls they received were, in fact, from their European users. So Steve suspects that this might be a network issue. So he looks at the performance dashboard from the Network Intelligence Center to see how the network within GCP is performing. And he sees that everything is great. So the next thing he does is that he suspects this might be an external access issue. So he looks at the network topology view. And what the network topology view shows him is that a lot of his European users are in fact being served from the suboptimal US Central 1 region instead of their own European deployment. So he calls up the networking team and tells them that, hey, this is what is happening. And the networking team think that this could be because of the oversubscribed pool of resources, which is making the load balancer reroute traffic to the US Central 1 region. And they fix this by adding more resources to the European region and also reconfiguring the load balancer to make sure that any data or any users accessing the application from within Europe are served from within the European deployment. So he gives a call to his friend and says that, hey, now that it's fixed, we can look at something else. And he is, in fact, surprised to see another recommendation on the networking perspective, the VPN overutilized recommendation. And this isn't even something that he went looking for, but it did grab his attention because something of this sort could become a huge bottleneck or a problem in the future. What he sees in the recommendation is that one of the VPN tunnels has been approaching its utilization capacity, and very soon it might become a bottleneck. So he calls up the networking team again and tells them to add redundant VPN tunnels so that they can preempt and avoid this issue. Okay, so Steve has crossed networking and compute off his list. Now he turns to his data deployment. It turns out that one of his teams is using Google Bigtable for one of their projects, and they don't have anything in place to back up the data that they have in Bigtable. So what happens if one of the developers makes a mistake in their code and writes gibberish or garbage into a critical customer table? It can be very hard to revert from that situation. So what Steve does is he follows the data flow recommender option from Active Assist. What this does is that with one click, he's able to create a data flow job that continuously backs up data from Bigtable into Google Cloud Storage so that in case there's ever a system failure or a user error, they're able to retrieve that data from cloud storage back into Bigtable. This seems like another improvement that he can feel more confident about in his deployment. Steve feels pretty good about all the actions and the steps that he's taken, and he's able to do this with just a few clicks in a matter of a couple of hours. He did not have to spend a lot of time looking through logs, writing scripts to understand what's going on. It was all with just a few clicks, right? So he calls up Alice and tells her the good news. And then while he's on the phone with her, he also continues to poke around the other options for optimization in his deployment. What he discovers is that in addition to the Active Assist recommendations in the Google Cloud Console, he could also query the Recommender API directly. So he decides to write a custom script that pulls new recommendations from the Recommendations API and puts it in some sort of a newsletter and gives him a notification in his inbox every Friday so that he's aware and on top of things about what's happening in his deployment and he's not caught off guard in case of any potential issues that might be coming up. I'm now going to hand it back to Duncan to take you through what Steve does next.
All right, thanks, Nikila. So, our man Steve's done a great job of helping Alice with her application performance issues, and now he's got Bob, the finance director, knocking at his door. Now, Bob has said that everybody in the organisation needs to cut their costs by at least 25%. Now, Steve's never really liked Bob, but they sit down to think through what a few cost optimization options could be for Steve's project. So the first thing they talk about is total cost of ownership. They've used a lot of self-managed services. Could they perhaps use some serverless services to make things more efficient? Or maybe they could use a different database service. And there could be ways for them to optimize the use of their current resources as well. So they talk about how they might be able to do this without sacrificing performance and availability. And finally, there's the pure finance angle. So with all the cloud products that Steve's team is relying on, there is some complexity on the billing side. There's quite a lot of services there. Some of them have different pricing models and different discounts that they could pick from. So just like with troubleshooting the performance issues, cost cutting can sometimes be challenging and it can take a lot of time and effort. So what Steve decides to do is to take a look and see what Active Assist has to offer in this space. So he pulls up the recommendation hub and focuses on the cost optimization cards this time. And right away, he's seeing some recommendations that talk about his application's compute resources, storage, and billing. He's already familiar with the right sizing recommendations that he looked at before on the performance side of things. So he starts with the ones that look similar but appear to be geared towards cost savings. So Steve realizes there's a number of VMs in his project that are way too large for the tasks they've been allocated for. And I know from customers I've worked with, this is a really common scenario. So he applies the recommendations and realizes substantial savings by removing the extra compute capacity that his project didn't really need. And he's getting those savings straight away as soon as he puts the recommendations into place. The next thing he looks at is the billing model optimization opportunities to further reduce costs. So in the past, he's looked into committed use discounts, but he wasn't quite sure how to operationalize it. So before using Active Assist, he would have had to do a lot of things on his own to optimize his billing model. He would have had to look at understanding the team's usage patterns, figure out the trade-offs versus the current model. This current model is using sustained use discounts. And finally, he'd have to project the impact of any changes to his project billing model. So he's glad to see that Active Assist has already done all of this heavy lifting for him. He grabs a screenshot with the projected savings and sends it off to Bob, the finance director, to get his approval to switch from on-demand pricing to a 3-year commitment that would slash their compute cost by almost 50%. So it's quite an easy thing to do. It's just a matter of changing the configuration and automatically you'll be getting those additional savings. So as he moves to the other billing model optimization opportunities, he sees Active Assist has more recommendations for his project. They've been using BigQuery as a data warehouse, and their application data has been growing more and more as more people have started to use BigQuery. And their current on-demand billing model cost has been going up. So the recommendation here is for Steve's project to consider switching to a BigQuery slot billing model where they can run as many queries as they need for a fixed amount of monthly slots. And a BigQuery slot is a unit of compute that's used when you're doing queries. So based on Steve's team's usage history, Active Assist has estimated they'll save a lot on their bill without negatively impacting performance. This is really important to Steve. I've worked with a number of customers who've been able to use this sort of model to really save a lot of money. And it's great to have something like Active Assist that can do that assessment for you as to what the impact's going to be. Now they walk through the resource optimizations that Steve has already implemented, which resulted in immediate savings, and also agree on implementing a billing model that changes the way that they're structured for their billing in the cloud. And this they're expecting to yield substantial savings over time. Now, as they wrap up, Bob asks Steve if he can apply similar techniques to other projects in their organization. They've already saved a lot on Steve's project. So Steve goes back to his desk and has a look at the BigQuery export feature. And what this does is it allows him to dump a lot of the information from the insights and recommendations that Active Assist provides into a BigQuery table to do custom analysis across the whole organization really easily. So Steve's already familiar with BigQuery because I use it for their project. So a few hours later, he sends Bob, the finance director, a link to a dashboard that he's created in Google's Data Studio. And this shows that they've got substantial cost savings across multiple projects in their organization. So he's been able to really optimize the cost quite significantly, both for his own project and more broadly across the organization. Now I'm going to hand back to Nikila to talk about Steve's next challenge.
Thanks, Duncan. So now Steve has both performance and cost optimized for his infrastructure. So he's turning to security next. Now, his organization has always taken security very seriously, and he knows that there are already a number of in depth security measures in place. But because they've grown so much as an organization, he thinks that now is a good time to sit down and reassess the measures that they've taken and make sure that they haven't left anything to chance. So he decides to sync up with Molly, who is the head of information security, and discuss two things that they might want to reassess. A couple of things come to mind as they're thinking through this. The first is permissions. So, do all of their employees have just the right amount of permissions they need to do their job and not more? Because overgranted permissions can pose a huge security risk. They can cause malicious incidents, or they can even cause incidents that are innocent human errors. Whatever the case, such incidents can then lead to data breaches, data loss, or even changes in infrastructure that can be very hard to troubleshoot and revert later down the line. Next is networking, and Molly is especially concerned about this because she recently read about a competitor's data breach that happened just a couple of months ago, in which the competitor had left an open port which was allowing traffic in from an insecure zone. And there was a misconfigured firewall rule that was letting this happen. So she wants to make sure that all of their firewall configurations are airtight. Then there's this whole set of considerations around sensitive data and how to protect the identities of their own users who have access to this data. Because if the identities of such power users are compromised or stolen, they can be misused and can cause a security nightmare. Steve knows that Active Assist should be able to help him with these security challenges as well. And he's happy to see that Active Assist does in fact provide recommendations around the areas of IAM, firewalls, as well as identity theft. He decides to get into permissions first. Now, Steve, like most project owners, wants to implement the principle of least privilege. What the principle of least privilege is that each and every project user only has the minimum number of permissions they need to do their jobs, not even one permission more. But implementing this principle in practice is easier said than done because he has 100 different users in his project, and if he tries to remove permissions without, conferring with them, he could be breaking something in production, or he could just slow things down by adding new processes in his project. Which is why he's very happy to see ActiveAssist's IAM right-sizing recommendations. Now, these IAM right-sizing recommendations give him an indication of how many permissions a user is not using and for how long. And these recommendations don't just tell him to remove these unused permissions, but also help him figure out what permissions these users might need. Just to step out of the story for a bit, I work with a lot of startups in the India market, and what happens is that these organizations are in that hyper growth phase because they've only been around for a few years. So they're adding new people to their company, they're adding new projects and initiatives and services and products, and what that leads to is an increase in the deployment of resources on the cloud. And what that leads to, in turn, is a nightmare for managing access to these resources. So what ends up happening is that they find it very difficult to keep tabs on what's happening in terms of their IAM. So I always recommend my customers to set aside time every few months, every quarter or so, to make sure to look at this list of recommendations and ensure that they have a very tight IAM in place for their organization. Okay, now back to Steve. So what Steve is doing now is he's clearing up and deleting all the unused service accounts, and he's also granting smaller and much more granular permissions to his users. And he's doing this with just a few clicks. Now as he's going through this process of removing the unused accounts, he realizes that it'll be really useful to understand who has access to what in this project so that I have everything I need, the information that I need in terms of access at my fingertips. And Policy Analyzer helps him do this. So it gives him information around, hey, which VMs can John delete? Who can delete this project, or who has access to this BigQuery dataset? And while he's looking through this information in the policy analyzer, he does in fact notice that there is a service account that is able to access a BigQuery dataset that it's not supposed to be accessing. So instinctively, he wants to delete this account as soon as possible, but then he stops himself and thinks that, hey, what if I break something important in production? So what he does is he uses Active Assist Policy Simulator. So with the policy simulator, he can check the proposed policy changes against their 90-day history just to ensure that with these changes, he's not going to break any important access that has happened in the past. And once he gets details as to what those important access permissions might be, he can just grant those specific permissions at a very granular level so that he can remove the other permissions that are not needed. Next, he turns to the network. Now, firewall is the most fundamental layer of protection for Steve and his team. But managing it has been quite a headache for Steve because his configurations have grown more and more over the years, which is why Steve is relieved to see the firewall insights from Active Assist. And what the firewall insights from Active Assist tells him is that they give information about the unused firewall rules and how long those rules have been unused for. And this is such an important piece of information because if he leaves this as it is, he is allowing unwanted access in the future, which can lead to a huge security risk. And in addition to this information about the unused rules, Active Assist also gives him firewall optimization insights, which gives him information in terms of redundant firewalls, misconfigured firewalls, or unreachable firewalls that he can just delete and clean up his firewall configurations. He is very happy to see these insights because they help him simplify his giant of a firewall configuration and make it much easier to manage and maintain it going forward. But as he's about to apply these recommendations, the same thought crosses his mind again. Hey, what if I break something important? So for that, he uses the connectivity test in the Network Intelligence Center, which allows him to verify and double check the impact of these configuration changes as he's applying them. This gives him confidence, especially in a couple of scenarios in which maybe he wasn't 100% sure if it was okay to remove a particular firewall rule. Now, in the area of protecting his power users' identities, Steve can turn again to Active Assist for help. He enables the phone as a security key recommendation from Active Assist for his organization's most at-risk users. And these are users who have broad permissions, access to all the sensitive data in their project, and they pose a high security risk if their identities are stolen or compromised in any manner. He's very happy about the progress he's made so far. Both Steve and Molly are happy, and they realize they've been able to reduce their attack surface, which is getting them much closer to the zero trust environment that they want to build in their organization. I'm now going to hand it back to Duncan to summarize what we've discussed so far and also talk about a few next steps that you can take.
Great, thanks, Nikhila. So just to recap, we've looked at several examples of how Active Assist can help improve performance and availability, infrastructure costs, and the security posture. So I just want to talk about what you can do to learn more about this. Nikhila and I work with customers all the time who can really benefit from these solutions. So we're really excited about Active Assist, and we'd really encourage you to visit the website. There's a link on here. There's a lot more information than we've been able to cover today about the different solutions involved in Active Assist and the features there. The other thing you can do if you've got a Google Cloud Platform environment is just go to the recommendation hub that's there. And I think you'll probably find there's a bunch of recommendations there for you already that you can start to look at and take action on. So, it's so automatic, you don't even have to set anything up. Some of the features we've highlighted are only available in limited preview today. So if you're interested in getting early access to all the new features as they get developed, we'd really encourage you to join the Active Assist Insider group. And there's a link on the website where you can sign up for that. And finally, there's a bunch of other Cloud On Air sessions with deeper dives into some of the features we've covered. So they're listed here. I'd strongly encourage you to take a note of the ones that interest you and have a look at those sessions. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us together today. We really hope that you found the session useful and that you'll be able to leverage Active Assist to bring some Google magic to optimize your cloud operations. Thank you.
Thank you.